Hey labrats, welcome to the Metal Lab studio, and tonight we have in my company Danny and Jeff from Weapon UK. Good evening, guys.
Good evening from Sweden.
Evening, Tom.
How are you both?
Yeah, really good, really good. Yeah, cool. Good to see you, mate.
And you. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the evolution of the new wave of British heavy metal. So before lockdown, obviously, it was killing it, wasn't it? The actual scene. What's your thoughts on it at the moment? Obviously, when we get back out on the road, would you think it would still be as strong?
I bloody well hope so.
Yeah. Well, I think it's got to be. I think one of the things with the lockdown, with what's been happening with lockdown so far, my feeling is that the demand for live music will probably go up. People kind of looked at it and took it for granted. So generally, I think and I hope that the demand will go up even better than it was before. And if that's the case, it should be the same with the new wave as well.
Yeah, definitely.
The only problem for us now, good evening again. The only problem will be for us is this bloody Brexit shit is playing in Europe.
Yeah.
You know, already we have gigs for November, and the promoters are a bit weary about, you know, signing the contracts now because they're not sure what's going to happen. But
it is difficult, isn't it?
British bands. I mean, I'm okay because I'm Irish. I have an Irish passport. So I might have to get a foreign band around me.
I'm irreplaceable, Daniel.
But you're nearly Spanish now, Jeff, aren't you?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a bit of a worry, you know, that side of things. And you know, there's not really enough work in the UK for the new wave bands. You know,
yeah,
limited appeal there, unfortunately. And limited venues, and there'll be even less after lockdown and the coronavirus.
Yeah.
This is the problem.
Sadly.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the beginning of your life. So, how did you both get involved in music? Where did it all start for you guys?
Well, Jeffrey, you can take that start.
For me, well, with music, it was. I always loved music. I was surrounded by music. You know, I mean, like Danny, Danny's an Irishman. I've got Irish in my family, Scottish in my family. Music's there. My brothers play guitar. You know, various members of my family played different instruments and what have you. Surrounded by it. My dad sang, and we'd always do stuff at home and that kind of thing. You know, so I always had an interest in it. And then I kind of, for me, as far as hard rock music is concerned, is I heard Deep Purple in rock when I was about 12.
Wow.
And it, you know, to me, it was like a sound that came from outer space. I didn't know what the hell it was. You know, the track Speed King. You know, I just thought, what the fuck is that? And then, you know, and I didn't even realize what the instrumentation was, and you know, why the singer was screaming his head off and what have you. And I decided once I was told who was in the band and what they were doing, that I'd like to play the guitar. And but I didn't start immediately because my brothers, who were both guitar players, they didn't want me to play guitar because they did, and they thought, well, we don't want another guitarist in the family.
Right. So
I just carried on with my football career until my 16th birthday, where I persuaded my mum to buy me a little Jedson guitar from Woolworths, and that's where it started for me.
Cool.
On my side was, I mean, I've got like 6 brothers, and all a little bit older than me. Well, half of them are older than me. So they would bring in like the 60s stuff. And of course, Top of the Pops back in the day. But it was when I seen Small Faces on Top of the Pops.
Wow.
Tin Soldier. That's me. I was away. Immediately loved it. And formed my first band there. With, a couple of guys, John and Chris Campbell. John is now fronting a Jimi Hendrix Experience tribute band. Great guitarist. And his brother Chris was one of the original drummers in Judas Priest. So that was the beginning of my career. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this on. Okay, go on.
So why do you think there's been such a resurgence in the new wave again? Because, you know, I've seen over the past sort of 4 or 5 years that, you know, the concerts that the bands are playing in, they're selling out, you know, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, why do you think that is now?
I don't really know. I just think that a lot of young kids coming up who are listening to the, you know, obviously with YouTube and the like, they're seeing the old videos and listen to stuff then, and you know, and of course, our association with Motorhead has brought us a lot of young fans, because I mean, Motorhead fans just go from like 2-year-old to 200-year-old. So I think that's, for us, that's how, you know, they're into us. Thank God. And we, of course, for us, again, we had a long break, you know. So kind of a fresh new wave of British heavy metal band, if you like.
I think it's as Danny says, you know, it's a generational thing, isn't it? You know, when you're as you go on, I remember reading with Bruce Dickinson talking about Iron Maiden and talking about how young their audience is now. You know, and I mean, obviously on a much bigger level with them, because they're a, you know, a hugely internationally successful band. You know, hundreds of millions of album sales and what have you. But you know, you've got young girls, teenage girls going to their concerts, and the lads as well, you know, as well as, you know, the fathers who saw Iron Maiden originally, probably down the Marquee in 1980, which is when Danny and I were playing down there in the late 70s, early 80s, and those kids that may have all set the stage on that and that kind of stuff that we released in the early 80s, that's been passed on, you know, generationally as well, on nowhere near as big a scale as the likes of Maiden, but it's still there. I mean, we're always surprised.
Sorry, an example of that is we played in Bulgaria in, was it 2012, Jeff?
Yeah, it's 2011.
And when we came off stage, there was a few kids there, you know, like 17, 18 years of age. And, you know, they couldn't believe that Weapon were still, still playing, but alive. Because,
wow.
Because one of the kids said, my dad bought your single, like in 1980 in London. This is in Bulgaria. Wow. And we're going, yeah, really? And he said, like, it's his birthday today. Would you speak to him? So we get on the phone to this guy's father, and he couldn't believe we were alive. But anyway, it just shows you how they hand down. You know, I say these guys were 17, 18 years of age, and he'd heard it was through his father. And Jeff was saying, you know, it's a generational thing.
That's right. And I mean, when we spoke to him on the phone, he couldn't believe it. He wouldn't actually believe it was us. You know, and even though he knew his son was going to the gig, of course he'd never spoken to us ever before, so we were just the voices on the other end of the phone. Some English guys on the other, or British guys, a British guy and an Irish guy on the other end of the phone.
Very sad.
So and that's it. I think it must be a generational thing, and also I think to a certain degree, the people like to, you know, they look at the new wave of British heavy metal and they look at it as a kind of a type of music. Yeah. You know, and people, you know, they like to hang their hat onto that kind of thing. And in many ways, it's almost, you know, it became very obscure for a period of time. I mean, when Danny and I were doing Weapon all those years, 40 odd years ago, you know, we didn't see it as being obscure. We just saw ourselves as being, you know, people that love music.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. And we, you know, we've had our influences from before, which is playing the music we loved, and that was it. And I think people like to look at the way that music is, and they can say the new wave of British heavy metal and hang their hat on it and say, well, but it's an era, of course. It's not a type of music. It's an era. You know, and it was named by the press at the time. I think it was Jeff Barton or Pete Mikowski or someone like that. Was it that originally came up with the title? I mean, we weren't even aware of it. We didn't. It was Jeff Barton, was it? Yeah.
So thinking about the early 80s, obviously you had all these amazing bands, you know, like yourself, Overdrive, Sparta. You all come in really quick. I mean, why do you think there was such like a big interest in the new wave?
Well,
Why that genre?
For me, I think it was because Maiden took off.
Mm-hmm.
Then every record label wanted another Maiden,
right?
And that created.
Well, it was a big underground swelling up at the time because of punk. You know, punk had kind of come in and kind of not wiped out, but kind of, you know, put hard rock music, progressive rock, heavy metal, whatever you want to call it. They put it under the radar because punk just basically, you know, became this phenomenal sort of media success. Yeah. And the bands that Danny and I grew up on, they weren't singles bands. They were very, very quietly selling hundreds of millions of albums, outselling everybody all over the world. But these guys could walk down the street and nobody knew who they were. You know, they wouldn't recognize them unless they were fans of the band. Then punk came in. It was very visual. They were on top of the pops all the time. The Sex Pistols were on TV swearing and what have you. Everybody's walking around with safety pins in their ears and Mohican haircuts and that kind of stuff. And then us guys who were probably a similar age to the punk guys at the time, but we'd actually learned to play a bit. You know, we weren't just involved in it on the very basis of, you know, the attitude and all that kind of stuff. We wanted to play like our heroes,
and much more handsome.
Well, of course, that goes without. Look at us, for Christ. and so I think that what happened was, you know, we were playing. I mean, Danny was playing in other bands through the mid to late 70s, and so was I. And you know, we were playing the clubs and the pubs, and along with people like Steve Harris and, you know, and Paul Sampson and the bands that were coming forward at that time. And it just happened that as punk kind of began to disintegrate slightly, people began to get a bit more of an interest in hard rock again. And the club scene was really good in the late 70s, early 80s, really good. It was really cooking. And then it just happened to be this thing where, you know, Sounds, I think they went out and discovered Def Leppard or something. And they did a big thing on Def Leppard and said, oh, look, you know, it's, you know, heavy metal's coming back. It's the new wave of British heavy, whatever, you know, and that's kind of what happened. And then, as Danny says, you know, Maiden got a major deal really early on. They got a big management deal as well, didn't they? It was Rod Smallwood, wasn't it?
Yeah, the man.
And that paved the way. Sorry.
So how did it first? How did you, like, where did it all start with Weapon? Who like, you know, who came up with the name? Who was the founder of the band? How did all that story sort of come into it?
Well, Jeff had a band called Fast Relief. Shitty name, I know. And he was looking for a singer. And the same week he put an advert in Melody Maker looking for a singer, I put an advert looking for a band. Pure coincidence. And I auditioned with him at a rehearsal studio in Wandsworth, which is owned by Jodie Turner's father, John.
Monster, was it? Monster Studios.
I think it was Monster, yeah. It was above Nero's Palace, anyway.
Yeah.
It was above Nero's Palace pub. Anyway, done the audition, and of course I got the gig immediately because I was so good. And,
we were blown away.
We were blown away. Then I went off on my holidays to Malta, and I came back and we started rehearsing. And the two original guys we had, we'd done one gig for Virgin Publishing, and under the name of Fast Relief, I think it was. And A, I didn't like the name. B, Virgin weren't keen on the rhythm section, although they were lovely guys, you know.
Yeah,
they weren't keen on them. So I brought in Baz Downs, the late Baz Downs, who suddenly passed away last year, and Jeff brought in Bruce Bislin, and then we thought, well, we have to get a name. And a friend of mine, Bob Sawyer, who you probably know from Iron Maiden, Praying Mantis, and he was in Weapon at one point. He always had an expression: if something was great, he'd use the expression, "It's Weapon." So let's go with Weapon. And there you have it. That's how we got the name.
Cool. So how did you manage to get on the Aces Up Your Sleeve tour in 1980? How did that all come about?
Again, that's, you know, just look at the draw. We were signed to Virgin Publishing in the summer. We formed a march and we signed to Virgin Publishing in the summer. And we were doing a gig at, Virgin had a place called The Venue in Victoria in London. Big old cinema converted into a club. Fabulous place. And we were doing a gig there. And a friend of ours, Hillary, was close friends with Eddie Clark. And she brought him along to the gig. She worked for Virgin as well. And sorry, my wife's being rude. She brought Eddie along to the gig. And he really liked the band. And he spoke to him afterwards. He says, "Oh, you know, I'd love to get you on the next Motorhead tour." And we go, "Oh, that'd be really cool," you know. Terrified at the thought of it. As Motorhead, you know, had this.
Yeah.
We had this image of them. Anyway, he spoke to the Lemmy and Phil and the management, and a hastily arranged gig was done at the Camden Palace for them to see us. And Jeff, you could take over from there. What happened?
Yeah, so we, you know, we had the gig and Eddie was there, and as Danny was saying, and it seemed like what we were doing. You know, I mean, I don't have any real sort of recollection of it being there. I remember Danny or somebody telling me that Fast Eddie from Motorhead was there, and my understanding is, Dan, is that Eddie really liked us, and he thought he'd put us forward for to go on tour with the next up and coming Motorhead tour, which was to promote their then big album at the time, the Ace of Spades. And but he had to go through Lemmy first, because obviously Lemmy ultimately was the band leader, always was, and he was the one that would say yay or nay. The great thing about Motorhead, I think, at that time was they were so independent. You know, they were basically they had management, they had tour management, they had record deals and record companies and everything else. But if Lemmy didn't want to do it, they didn't do it, and that was it. I mean, you know, it wasn't a case of, you know, we'll all sit down and have a meeting and think about what we're going to do, and Lemmy would just say, well, we're not doing that. We're doing this, and that's it. And that was one of the great appeals of Motorhead, that they were so they were loose cannons, weren't they? You know, in many ways. You know. And anyway, the bottom line is he spoke to Lemmy about it, persuaded Lemmy obviously to come down to the Music Machine, which was our next gig. Now, you may not remember this, Tom, but there was a massive gig in London called the Music Machine in Camden. I think it became the Camden Palace later on, didn't it? Was it Camden Palace?
Camden Palace, yeah. Now it's called Coco.
Okay, now it's called Coco. I mean, again, it's like it was an old cinema. I mean, massive place, wasn't it? I mean, balconies and all sorts. Great stories about that. I mean, I first met Michael Schenker playing pool with Michael Schenker at the Music Machine. I digress. We played the gig that night. Lemmy was out there. We knew he was going to be there, and we were really tense about the whole thing. And we did the sound check. We went down the pub. We had way too much to drink. We're just lads, you know, late teens, early 20s, or whatever, you know. I mean, it's way too much to drink. Had a massive row. Decided that we never wanted to talk to each other ever again. we're not playing tonight. Fuck you, that kind of thing, you know. Eventually, decided that we ought to give it a go, even though we had absolutely no chance to do anything with it.
Do the farewell gig.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. Yeah, I think to be honest with you, it's probably Baz, you know, dear old Baz, who's, as Danny says, unfortunately no longer with us. I think it was Baz that persuaded us that we should do it. You know, I think me and Danny and Bruce had decided that's it. We're not going to get involved. You know, fuck it, sort of thing. You know, sorry, I swore then. And then anyway, the bottom line is we went up, we played with a great gig. It was full of vitriol and anger and that kind of stuff. You know, Baz and I ended up smashing our guitars across each other, and you know, we had no shirts on, and we were, you know, I think you hit somebody over the head with a pool cue, Danny.
I did indeed.
Was that right? So yeah, I mean, honestly, it was like absolute chaos. All this was going mad, the whole lot. So we all got back in the dressing room afterwards. We were all sitting there and, you know, sort of sweating and sort of, you know, and laughing at how stupid, you know, we were and what have you. And then I'm not sure. Did Lemmy come into the dressing room and talk to Baz, or what happened? There was something there when
Yeah, he came in or we seen him after the show on the bar, and he uttered the immortal words. Any band that has that such contempt for their audience have to tour with Motorhead.
Wicked.
We got the gig.
That is an amazing story, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Really, really is.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Probably one that you'll take away with for the rest of your life as well. You know, it's what an amazing memory to have, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean the tour itself was just, I mean, incredible. It was one of the biggest tours at the time. It was 32 dates in 42 days, 4 sellout nights at Hammersmith. You know, it's just, and a bunch of young kids. It was fucking great. You know,
some very pissed up nights, probably.
Oh, many of those.
Yeah. Well,
Lemmy's a bit of a drinker, isn't he? So
he
is. He was rarely drunk. I mean, you know, he's the sort of guy that literally could drink, and everybody else had pulled down, he'd still be standing up. And you know, he's a serious. What's the word? I mean, they say a hellraiser, but no, he wasn't really. He's quite a calm and intelligent guy, but he just did exactly what he wanted to do, and that was it. You know, and he just did it. He wasn't nasty in any way, shape, or form. He was. He was a great guy. I mean, he was pretty encouraging to us as young guys and everything. Sorry, Dan.
I'll say he was a little bit angry with me after he'd watched 1 or 2 shows. The first one was at Ipswich, which was the opening night, and the second one was Friars in Aylesbury. And he'd watched the shows, and I was summoned to his dressing room, and he said, "This is not working, mate. This is taking this all too serious." Which I was. I mean, this is a great opportunity for us. And of course, I wasn't drinking before I went on stage or anything. It was like straight, do the job. And you know, you need to lighten up. You know, are you going to blow it? So I was given a very large Jack Daniels, and that became my medicine every night before I went on stage. And we never had any problems after that.
Do you think that moment was the moment that actually catapulted you back, you know, into that sort of bit of stardom that you needed, that popularity?
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, you know, we were slowly but surely building it up. You know, the London circuit.
Sorry to interrupt you, Jeff, but you have to remember we formed only in March.
Wow.
We signed the deal in the summer. This tour was in October, so we were there on the bill. Go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
But I think when things happen in the music business, they happen quickly. You know, if they you know, it's very rare. I mean, it does happen where people are doing things for years and years and years, and suddenly they're catapulted into the limelight as such. But it happened pretty quickly. Everything kind of fell into place after that. You know, the recordings and you know, the deal and then we got management, because we didn't have management at that point. We had to get management because there's no way we could have organised that tour and somebody else to, you know, organise the hotels and everything else, because Lemmy certainly weren't going to bloody do it, that's for sure. So
he'd have probably slept on a park bench, wouldn't he?
Indeed.
most of the kids we stayed in their hotel, you know, so we stayed with them. So after every gig, we'd end up back at whatever hotel they were playing at. We'd end up in the bar with them, you know, and the drinking until, you know, what time in the morning? We'd all go to bed, get up in the morning, and then we were still at the bloody bar.
Blimey.
And we were the kids. It was a good 10,
we
good 10
could
15 years old with us. Pardon?
I said we could do it then.
Yeah. We could do it then, yeah.
This is why I'm on my 60th day without alcohol.
But the thing is, at that time, we didn't have any product. So it was kind of, you know, what we're going to do. I mean, you know, we've got to have something to promote. So we've been recording, you know, like the Virgin had been looking to sign us, and and they put us into 2 or 3 different studios, the Barge and the Manor in Oxfordshire and the Townhouse. I mean, top world-class level recording studios. Unbelievable. Wow. Again, we've been thrown into that situation. And then, and they listened to everything we did, and they heard It's a Mad, Mad World, and they thought it was a hit song. So they decided under those circumstances that they'd put it out. It was Laurie Dunn, actually, Virgin Music Publishing, who decided he basically stuck his neck out because we needed something before the tour, and put together the 12-inch and the 7-inch version of It's a Mad, Mad World with the B-side as Set the Stage Alight. And so when we went out on tour, I think it was about a week after we'd started the tour, the single came out then, didn't it? Something like that. It wasn't before.
A couple of weeks,
anyway.
The 13th of November.
Oh, was it? Okay. So we're actually on tour and getting ourselves established with the fans, and it came out. So for the first 2 or 3 weeks, while we're touring, we had nothing really to promote. But ultimately, by the time we got to the end of it, it was selling well all over the world. And the interesting thing about it is, it's not It's a Mad, Mad World that became remembered. It was the B-side, Set the Stage Alight. I mean, we saw it as a double A, but it was definitely being led with It's a Mad, Mad World, And Set the Stage Alight, it's ended up being a very, very influential piece of music.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Ghost of War. So the first time, my recollection of it was when I done a review for it in 2019.
And a great one it was as well, mate.
Thank you. So what was the writing process for that album?
Wow. Oh, right. Yeah. Well, that's kind of. I tend to write a lot of it, and what I'll do is, if I get an idea, I'm one of those kind of people that I'll just spontaneously get an idea and I'll put it down in whatever format I've got to hand. Very often, I'll sing it or play it into my phone. And then I'll listen to it, and then I'll forget about it and go back the next day and think, well, okay, if I go back the next day and it's memorable, then I'll work on it. And then, okay, that was it. So that's what I do. And I put the basic format down and then fire that across to Danny, what the idea was. Sometimes I'd have a melodic idea. Sometimes it'd just be guitar and chords. Sometimes it would be a lyrical idea, whatever. I fire it across to Danny and he'd come back and go, yeah, I like that, or I don't like it, whatever. And then he'd go away and work on either a new set of lyrics or another idea for a melody or whatever. So that's kind of how it begins to take shape. And then from there, the boys in the band, bass, drums, guitar, vocals, will get together in a recording studio, and then we'll kind of knock it into shape, get the excitement going between the four of us, get people's ideas. And the great thing about in a band like Weapon is everybody's got an equal say in everything. So if you'll be involved with many bands, and they'll go, no, well, I didn't write it like that, so it's not going to go like that. It's not like that with us. It's like somebody comes up with an idea, everybody will listen. If it's no good, we'll say, nah, that's shite. All of us collectively, if it's good, we go, yeah, that's great, let's do that. And that's kind of how it all begins to take shape, really.
Oh, you said it very well, Jeff. You don't need to about there.
Where did the title come from, Ghost of War? Who came up with that title?
Danny.
I have to take the credit for that one. I wrote the lyrics. Yeah. I wrote the lyrics on that one, and
it's an amazing song.
Thank you very much. Thanks. And I just think we lifted that song by having Claire Cunningham do the diddly diddly bit, the Irish bit. Claire from Thunder Mother, former member of Thunder Mother, now an international star in Nashville. I think it gave us something different to a great tune. It just lifted it to another level, I think. And I have to say that was Jeff's idea.
It's such a cool album cover as well, isn't it?
It was a really good album cover.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. What's that based on? Is it like a Vietnam, stuff like that? Or
well, to me, it looks like something like Vietnam because of the army boots and all that malarkey.
Yeah.
But we'd have to ask the artist for that. But I think that was the gist of it.
It's just so.
Yeah,
cool.
I think he did a really good job. Yeah.
I loved it. I just love it. I mean, I love the album as well, and the first song, with your guitar playing, Jeff. Wow, unbelievable.
I'll give you that $5 after we finish this. The check's in the post.
Again.
Thank you so much. Really kind of you.
I mean, the thing with that as well is, after Rising from the Ashes.
Yes, it was a good album as well.
Great album, I think. Some great writing on that by Jeff.
Very.
And I think, you know, it's a real shame we didn't have a major label to push them in. Pure Steel. Initially, we released that on our own label, Rising from the Ashes, and then we done a deal with Pure Steel, German label. I mean, they're good at selling their stuff, but you know, from online point of view. But we really, had we had a major label, I think both of those albums would have done an awful lot better.
Yeah, it would have gone global. Yeah.
I think so. I mean, it'd be bought all over the world anyway, but sales would have been, I think, a lot better.
I think with,
you know,
if you listen to the 3 albums, if you listen to, you know, the one we recorded in 1980, which became Set the Stage Alight, which was basically all the stuff that we recorded initially, version publishing in those recording studios I mentioned. If you look at that as young guys at that particular time,
it's really good.
You had a combination of, you know, 4 kids that were wanting to sort of make their mark and also trying to find their style.
Yes.
So you've Set the Stage Alight, for instance, is very different to Mad Mad World, which is very different to Olivia, which is very different to Midnight Satisfaction, which is, you know, so it sounds like us because Danny's voice and our, you know, our instrumentation or what have you. But at that particular period of time, we had no formula and we weren't following up that. And I think over a period of time, people thought our formula was Set the Stage Alight and, you know, super, super fast. I mean, you know, I mean, we've been in scenarios where people have actually said that was, for them, it was the first thrash metal song. And it's, and people have sat down with a little timer on it and said there was nothing faster than that before that. You know, it was, I forgot how many BPI it is, but it's about 140, 150 BPI. It's very, very fast. And the reason it's fast is because our drummer, Bruce Bizzard, is an incredibly fast drummer. I mean, he's very, very sophisticated, very quick. His double bass drum playing on it is just phenomenal. And you know, we all locked into it. But it wasn't actually written that fast. It was written, you know, like Burn, like Deep Purple's Burn. It was kind of that sort of like, you know, fast at the time, but of course that's another level on. So, and I think because of the period of time where Weapon kind of called it a day at the end of sort of 81, early 82, and then, you know, the period of time that we had between then, staying together as friends and playing together in different bits and pieces. By the time we actually pulled it back together to actually do another album, which was what, 2011, 2012. It was kind of like we'd all changed musically. We'd all changed. You know, we had different influences. We were a little bit older. But the most important thing was we still wanted to create really exciting, memorable music. So when Ghosts of War came up, which is, you know, I think is not Ghosts of War, sorry, Rising from the Ashes came out. I think it's a super strong album. Commercially, I think it's a super strong album. And I know I'm saying that, but, you know, even every now and again, you know, I dip back into it and it takes me by surprise and I think, Jesus, that's strong. And maybe if it was 10 years earlier, it would have been a really, really big one. But by the time we got to Ghosts of War, we were writing together as a band. And I think Ghosts of War is probably the band's first real statement as a band, because it's all of our personalities. And I think the direction's there. I think the direction is, you know, if you listen to the first track and the last track, it all makes sense. It's the same band, the same album, that kind of thing, you know. So that's what I think, anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that album is the benchmark at the moment. I think, you know, I hope that you'll do a better album, but I think you're going to struggle to really do something as you know, musically as good as this one. It is, you know, I listen to it all the time. It's just like when I first heard it, when I was doing my review, I was like, wow, this blew me away. And then I heard that was the first one when I discovered you. So then I went back to your back catalogue as well, and like you were saying. When you were young guys, you can tell you were young guys, just living that dream, you know, and you're enjoying what you were doing. But then Ghosts of War took me to a completely different place as well. I was like, wow, this is technically one of the best I'd heard that year, you know, amazing.
Well, that's lovely. that throws people a bit as well, because we come from that era, new wave of British heavy metal. People expect us to play the same stuff we did in 1980, which is crazy. I mean, I know that there's a few bands out there doing that, but it doesn't make any sense to me. You know, we're talking 40 years later. If we hadn't matured as people and musicians, fucking sad state of affairs. But thankfully we have, and that's why we believe in the stuff we're doing now. You know, we think it's. I'm very proud of the 2 albums, or the 3 albums, the early stuff as well. I think
on the basis of I think the next one is gonna be better because we've kicked into that format now, and for us, you know, there's, as Danny was just saying, you know, there's no, well, we can't do that, and we can't do that, and we can't do that. We just do it. You know, it's like, do we like it? Yeah, we like it, and we find that formula. We find that connection, so to say, not formula, and then we just go for it. And so we don't, as Danny said, we don't think about it. We, you know, that's not new wave of British heavy metal enough. No. Is it great rock and roll? Is it exciting? Is it dramatic? Is it powerful? Yeah.
Is it a good song?
If we all think it is, then we do. Yeah, exactly. And we do it, and you know, it's kind of, you know, we like to try and think that we can try and reproduce the excitement that we felt as young guys when we were learning, when we were coming up as musicians, and how it moved us, and how we'd like to move other people with our music in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a 16-year-old son, and he's a musician, and I've tried to bring him up on the new wave of British heavy metal, like what, you know, through the 80s and 90s. And at first he struggled a little bit with the whole, you know, the sound, but then being a musician himself, he's like, oh my God, some of the musicians, like some of the guitar players are just amazing, aren't they? And I said to him, you really need to delve into it, because this is what heavy metal was all about in the 80s. You know, we didn't have all the genre specific and all this. This was heavy metal. This is what we knew as it.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Give him a good grounding.
Pardon?
Yeah. Well,
I said you're giving him a good grounding.
Yeah. So do you remember in the 80s when the whole sort of influx of patch shirts and all the young lads coming to the concerts? Were you sort of a part of that yourself?
I never wore the patch shirts.
We used to go to lots of gigs. I mean, we used to go, and all of our mates were involved at the time. You know, as mentioned earlier on, Samson, Praying Mantis. Yeah. As Maiden were coming for all the bands because Danny and I were both obviously in London at that time. I mean, Danny's not originally from London. I am. Well, not London, from just outside London, and Danny was actually living in London, and we'd go and see bands. The main thing we do is we blag our way into the gigs. You know, we go to the gigs, and we're both talkers. You know, we blag our way into the gig, and we'd be at the bar, you know, holding cool at the bar, you know, and then the guys would come up. But we'd always try, to be honest with you, we'd always try and, in terms of dress, we'd try and dress a little bit more like we're musicians, we're not fans, even though we're fans too. So you know, so we had the leather jackets and stuff and all that kind of stuff, and you know, and we kind of stripy trousers. I was never much on the old stripy trousers, but but Danny used to jump up a wardrobe to get into it. I used to hold him like that before we needed to jump up the wardrobe. It's the only way he could get into it. And you know, we go to places like the Marquee and the Music Machine, all the London places, you know, the Greyhound, and you know, and all those, the 100 Club and everything else at the time. And to be honest with you, we never really, we'd make an effort to see the bands we wanted to see, but the bands were so varied. I mean, sometimes you go and you'd walk, I mean, you know, in the late 70s, you walk in to see the Jam playing in the Greyhound, and the Police playing at the 100 Club, and the Sex Pistols playing, you know, somewhere in National Rooms or something like that. And, you know, and that, as that was coming forward, but at the same time, you'd get these metal bands coming through, and then, you know, and you'd watch them, and then we'd go and play at these places. We were lucky enough to have built our way up, and we'd go and play. And the bands that we'd been to see, that couple of weeks before, they'd turn up to see us. So we kind of we had that rapport with the musicians at the time as well. But me and Danny and the boys in the band and our friends were always at the bar. And when we were at the bar, if the kids came in and bought a drink, they'd look at us and they'd think, I recognize those guys, or they'd say they look like they're in a band.
Yeah, that's cool.
So we kind of wanted to stand out a little bit, you know, just to make so we kind of, you know, and rather than just blend into the crowd. But of course, once the band were on, you know, we weren't too cool for school then. If it was a great band, you know, we'd be down the front, you know, jumping around with the rest of them.
Happy days.
I remember going to see. Talking about the venue, I remember going to see Whitesnake.
Wow.
When it was David Coverdale's first tour after Deep Purple had split up. Must have been about 76, 77. And he released a solo album, and he formed a band and went off on tour. And I think the band was called David Coverdale's Whitesnake at the time. And it was absolutely packed, as you could probably imagine. I mean, this is way before Whitesnake made it big. And I remember being at the front of the gig, and my older brothers were at the back in the balcony, and all they could see was me at the front trying to clamber up onto the monitors to try and, you know, get my hands on the various members of the band, you know, with all the other guys, you know, with all the guys in the jackets and everything else. And so, yeah, we're fans as well as players, and vice versa, you know.
Oh, cool. Which will be.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
So if you could go back over the last 40 years, is there anything that you would change or do different or have done differently?
Well, for me, I wouldn't have signed with the management we signed with, because they were fucking shit. Bless them. Their heart was in the right place, but they had no clue. And that was kind of, I'm not going to blame them. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, it was their decision to sign them. And it's their fault things went wrong. But it didn't help having them as management, because when we come off the Motorhead tour, you know, we signed the publishing deal before we got the management. We literally signed the management just before we went on the tour. And we come off that tour, and apart from, I think they got about 8 dates, a small mini tour. That was it. And they kept holding out for a record deal. I mean, all the bands were getting deals. And they were holding out for, I guess, a better deal. But, you know, they get the record to give up then, you know, because there was enough bands out there that they could pick and choose who they wanted. And at the end of the day, I think Atlantic Records was interested in us, and band called More, and maybe More had better management, but they got the deal, which is a bit of a pain in the ass for us.
Yeah,
yeah. That's
it was right
the way it was, you know.
Right to the last minute, wasn't it? Right to the last minute.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we'd been led to believe they were going to sign us, you know? And then last minute we heard it was going to happen.
But that's the way the cookie crumbles, you know. Nothing we can do about it. Just, you know, at least we're still standing.
It's when you're young, you make bad decisions under any circumstances, and when you're involved in the music business, I mean, we never got into the music business for money. We got in the music business because we loved music and we loved playing music, and we loved, you know, we were on stage, we just loved it so much, you know. And ultimately, when things fell for us at the end of '81, it was purely and simply because we were all disillusioned, not with each other, but with the fact that we should have been working much harder than we were. And believe me, we wanted to work. We wanted to be doing things 24/7, right? I mean, we were writing new stuff, we were recording new stuff, we were rehearsing, and we were playing gigs, but not enough. And I mean, if you bear in mind that coming off the end of the Motorhead tour, and when we did, to give you an example, when we came off the end of the Motorhead tour, we went out and did some of our own dates. One of the first dates we did was at the Bristol Granary, and we broke the attendance record.
Wow.
At the Bristol Granary, and the band prior to us that had got the best audience in there was Yes, the band Yes. So I mean, everybody had played the Granary, and we'd never played it before. We came off the back of the Motorhead tour. And I'm not kidding, we couldn't get on stage. It was just jammed up against us. And from the minute we started, and they were on stage with us, and we were like, oh my god, you know, they're gonna break our gear, you know. I mean, it was one of those scenarios. So the demand was there, and for whatever reason, the management company didn't take advantage of it. I think they just didn't have the nous or the know-how to do it. If you look at what happened to Def Leppard and Iron Maiden, I mean, fantastic bands, and completely unique, brilliant players, fantastic music. But the difference between them and some other bands at that era, including us, the main difference was the fact that they had incredible management. And they got them working, they got them doing all the bits and pieces they needed to do. I mean, that first Iron Maiden now was written over a period of about 10 years. First couple of Iron Maidens, they've been playing that set in the London circuit, because I've seen them playing it. They played that set over and over again for, you know, 8 to 10 years, and a lot of the songs that were on there, and I don't want to get into any trouble here, but a lot of the songs that were on there, they were written by ex-members of the band, people that had gone through the band at the point. And so they hadn't actually found their way at that point. They just had great management, and the management picked them up at that point, as did similarly with Def Leppard. I mean, you've heard On Through the Night, the first Def Leppard album. It sounds completely different from Romania and Hysteria. You know, the management company drove them into that. So what I'm saying here is, I think that to a certain degree, we had more grounding in which way we were going at that point. We had more of a unique opportunity, but we made, because we were, you know, we had the huge advantage of going out on tour with Motorhead, but we had the distinct disadvantage of having to pull management together very, very quickly. And so we did, and we made a bad decision. They weren't right for us, you know, and they didn't know. They'd never managed a heavy metal band before. They actually managed the band before.
I would say the only other act that they managed was actually, they had Steve Hillage. The other guy was Nash the Slash.
Nash the Slash.
Remember Nash the Slash?
Yeah.
Canadian.
He was signed as well, wasn't he?
And he wore he was the first man to wear the Corona mask.
Right.
Some kind of weird mask. But that was so they didn't have a clue about heavy metal, you know. But there you go. You know, shit happens, you know.
Yeah. And you know, so we all got a little bit disillusioned at that point, and other bands were coming in for various members, trying to pull us into their bands and that kind of stuff, you know. And you get tempted and off you go. So, you know, you can look back and regret, but I'm the sort of person, and I know Dan is the same, that I don't have any regrets in life. You know, I think things are what they're meant to be. And I now find this a great privilege that we're able to still do this at our age, you know, at 35 years of age, you know.
Yeah.
The one great thing about that, you know, when we did implode, is the four of us still remain great friends. And
absolutely.
To this day, you know, sadly, Baz passed away last November. Sadly.
Yeah.
But you know, he left a great legacy of music as well. But you know, the four of us were the best of friends, and you know, as Jeff said earlier, we played in one of the bands over the years, and you know, we're still good mates. Thank God.
So, did it affect you much when you had to change the name to Weapon UK? Did that affect you?
It affected me.
Yeah. What's the story behind that? Can you sort of go into that a little bit?
Well, a friend of mine sent me. He was I think he was a tour manager for Uriah Heep, and he sent me a cutting saying, "I see you're touring Canada." I wish the fuck you were. And I checked it out in the band called Weapon. So I actually got in touch with the guy who was running it, and he was an Indian guy. And he said, "No, I'm I think from Bangladesh or somewhere like that."
Wow.
And he said, "No, we just play local gigs. You know, we're not going to infringe on you." And I said, "Oh, okay. No big deal. You know, we're going to hear you." And then a year or so later, I got this message from my friend saying, "You're touring Canada." So I got back in touch with this guy. And I said, "Well, what's the story here?" He said, "Oh, yeah, I'm with Canada. You know, got the band." black death metal band. And I said, well, you know, it's a bit off. You know, we've got a new album coming out, and you're infringing on us. And I said, you know, you need to knock her on the head. And next thing we knew, we had a letter from his manager. And what do you call it? Cease and what's the word, Jeff?
Cease and desist.
Yeah, unless you change the name and add UK. And you know, he got us by this short and curly basically, because he snuck under the radar and registered the name. I had registered originally in 1981, sorry. And he snuck under. I hadn't renewed it. I didn't know you had to do that. And he snuck in and registered. Then sent me the letter saying, you know, cease and desist for pretty big color. I said, not else you do, but add the UK, which really fucking pissed me off. Because then a few weeks after that, the band split up.
Oh, for goodness sake.
And I contacted him again. And I said, you know, well, you know, the band is split up. I have the decency to give the name back. And he went, no, they might release some other stuff. But they were one of 5 bands called Weapon.
Wow.
And including a Portuguese folk band.
yeah.
I can imagine that, Weapon. Anyway, no, I've gotten used to it now, but it really pissed me off. But we have an album coming out that we found some old cassettes with live stuff on. Very basic recordings because it's on a cassette. I got a friend here in Sweden put me in touch with a friend of mine, Robert, put me in touch with a guy who digitizes old cassettes. You really got one chance, particularly after 40 years in a drawer. So he digitized them for me, then got another Swedish guy to master them. And, you know, the sound quality is not, you know, brilliant, as you can imagine. But it's a piece of our history.
Yeah, I love that. I love the whole raw side of the music. You know, I love where it all started. That's amazing.
This is certainly raw. We sound like a punk band. All the songs that you hear on the Anthology album, they're about 100 miles an hour.
But that's cool.
It's really raw. So we got that coming out. We hope to have it in March, but it's looking out more likely maybe the beginning of May. I'm going to just release it on a vinyl with all the photographs from the tour, and I'll give you a little exclusive. It's called "No Peace Till Hammersmith."
Oh,
there's a track called "No Peace for the Weakest." The track,
yeah, which
has never been released, but it's never been released before this as well. So we thought stick that on. "No Peace Till Hammersmith."
The live the main bulk of that.
Sorry, Jeff. Just I was going to say that will be under the title of Weapon. There'll be no fucking UKs on it because it's recorded.
Yeah.
But the live stuff was all recorded on tour with Motorhead, and it was recorded off the desk. So the sound engineer for Motorhead at the time. You forget this stuff, but we remembered it after we heard it. He'd record us the night before, and then he'd use our recording to set up his PA. So what he'd do is he'd set up the top, the middle, the bottom, and all the sound registers on the PA. And we came in one day, and I remember this vividly. And I remember thinking, wow, the PA sounds fucking fantastic. Who's this band? And I suddenly realised it was us. And because it was live. And I said, when did you record this? He said, last night. And you were playing, and wherever we played, I don't know where it was, you know, Birmingham, Manchester, Glasgow, whatever.
Colston Hall,
Bristol. And Colston Hall, Bristol, yeah. And we're all like, wow, you know, it sounds incredible. Anyway, at the end of the tour, these 2 nights, one was at Hammersmith as well, wasn't it? Danny, was it Hammersmith?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So, and he'd recorded that as well. And he'd obviously given those tapes. I think he gave one to Danny and one to Bruce, and the drummer. And the Swains had been sitting on them for 40 years without even bloody listening to them. So it just, you know, it just came out of the blue, and we're sitting there 40 years later listening to us on stage in front of the massive crowd on tour with Motorhead. It brings a tear to your eye. To your eye.
Yeah.
You know, for us.
The funny thing was, I found the Bristol ones maybe last summer sometime, and it was my friend Robert made plays in Captain Blackbeard in Sweden. He said to me, "You have to release this." Like, oh no, you know, it's not that great, the sound quality. He said, no, it's history. I went, oh, okay. So I'm discussing that with Jeff and Bruce and all, and then Bruce says, "Well, I have a tape. It's just from Hammersmith." I was like, oh shit. So actually, the majority of the recording is from Bristol, because that's probably the best quality. And I think there's 2 or 3 tracks from Hammersmith. But at a later stage, we'll release the Hammersmith one as well. You know, we stick it all on a compilation thing or something. But the one coming out is, I think it's 10 or 12 tracks.
Some vinyl.
Excuse me. 10 or 12 tracks. No Peace Till Hammersmith.
Wow.
But, yeah, it's good. And it's a great
Plus
package.
our demos at the time.
Say it again, yeah.
Plus our demos at the time, which was material we never ever released. There's material that we'd written and had demoed at the time, and had never ever released. Now, normally you think, well, it couldn't have been any good if you didn't release them. But listening to it in retrospect, me and Danny went, Jesus, there's tracks on there that we'd be proud of writing now. Yeah. You know, we feel they're that strong.
And that just shows, as a bunch of young guys, how actually focused you were. If you were writing that good, you know.
Yeah. We were just writing constantly, you know, just literally. It just poured out of us.
I was literally,
you know, so that's exciting.
The thing again was, it was just, let's write good songs. It wasn't about following that route and this route. It was like, if somebody brought something and it was good, as Jeff said earlier, if it was shy, out the window. But it was all about writing a good song with a good hook and, you know, melodic. It can be as fast as you like, hard as you like, but it has to have melody, a meaning.
Yep.
And I think we've done that. We've achieved that.
So how do you feel that social media impacts on the band? How do you think you'd survive without it?
Ooh, I'm not sure
I think
we
it's certainly impacted on music, on generally, you know. And back to what you were saying earlier on, Tom, you know, another thing, and although we picked out that it was a generational thing, I think social media has certainly given, in particular, our era, that new wave of British heavy metal era, in particular, it gave it a new voice, a fresh voice, a fresh set of ears, if you like, for people listening to music for the first time, because very quickly, you know, your music could be heard around the world, and it was music that most people had never heard before.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, you can tell that when the sales come in, because although the albums are going through Pure Steel, we get a package ourselves that we can sell. We normally sell gigs, and you know, we're selling stuff like to Mexico, Brazil.
Wow.
Places like that, you know, and that's great. We know we're going worldwide. All we need to do now is play in those places.
Yeah.
Which is the next step.
Well, a great example of that is we set the stage alight and had our world's first release. I mean, you may or may not know the story of this, but picked up by a young drummer called Lars Ulrich. In Pasadena, I think it's Pasadena. Well, it was in California somewhere, and he used to go to an import shop and saw the cover, and he picked up the album, the single, the 12-inch single, took it home and set the stage alight on, and he put that on first, and it blew him away. And the reason I know this is because he told me. I was playing in London, and I did on the Friday. I was playing on the Saturday night, and on the Friday night, I'd done a live session on Friday Rock Show with Tommy Vance. I was playing with a band called Wildfire, and we did a session called on the Friday Rock Show with Tommy Vance, and the the next day we were playing in London, playing live in London, and Metallica turned up. Now this was about 1983, and so Metallica were on their way. They'd signed a deal, but they weren't, you know, the band they are now. They were a band that were just beginning to pick up, and they'd come to the UK specifically because that's where they felt all their greatest influences were from, and they wanted to come over and make a bit of a splash. And again, they had brilliant management at the time. We were playing at a pub in King's Cross, and Lars Ulrich and James Hetfield and Cliff Burton, again, rest his soul, and who else was in the band at the time? Dave Mustaine. They came into the band. Yeah. They came into the gig, and they came specifically to see us because they'd heard us on the Friday Rock Show the previous night, and they really liked us. And Tommy Vance said they're playing in London tomorrow, blah blah blah. So, you know, we're at the bar, and Lars, we did the sound check, and Lars came up to Bruce. I was talking to James, and Lars came up to Bruce and our drummer, and he said, "I really love your music. You're, you know, great players, blah blah blah." And he said to Bruce, "Have you been in any other bands before?" And Bruce said, "Yeah, we were in a band called Weapon before this. Me and Jeff, the guitar player." And it was a on your knees, we are not worthy moment to Bruce.
Oh wow!
James was saying, "You are responsible for us being who we are." He said, and he told him the story about the stage alone, and that speed that was played at, that I mentioned earlier on, and with that aggression and that attitude, and that's what him and James wanted to emulate at that time. Now, at the same sort of time, they were listening also, as you probably know, to Diamond Head and some of the other bands that were coming out at that particular period of time. But I think anybody with a discriminate ear could listen to the first two.
The opening.
Yeah, the what's the track called? Oh, Hit the Lights.
Hit the Lights.
It's like Hit the Lights through their breakthrough album, Ride the Lightning, and listen to that album, and I think you'd have to be a bit of a fool to realise that they weren't heavily influenced by that song.
Yeah.
And they told me, and I didn't realise any of this until about 15 years later when our drummer told me about it all and explained. He said, "Have you listened to Hit the Lights by Metallica?" And I said, "No." So he said, "Listen to it." So I did. I went, "Jesus fucking Christ! When did they release that?" And it was, 3 or 4 years after we'd actually recorded and released Set the Stage Alight. And then we realised that it was in their biography where they admitted it. They didn't need to admit anything, but again, when they said, they'd lifted the intro, the song substance, the speed, the drum patterns from Set the Stage Alight, and that we found out was the song that got them signed. So Metallica was signed on that song, which was a rip-off of that first song. All we want is a couple of million quid. We're not being greedy.
Apparently, they used to open their set with it because when they started out first, the whole set was, English band's material. But because the Americans hadn't heard any of it, they thought it was Metallica's own material. They admitted that kind of stuff. But what the hell, it's flattering that they choose to borrow the whole beginning of Jeff Summers.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to bring the interview to an end, guys. Is there anything that you would like to say tonight? Any shout-outs or any mentions that you'd like to say?
Well, I'd like to just say on behalf of Brian and Claire Meir, that from Meirfest, there's only a couple of days left on this album that we put out for a digital download album, The Flame Still Burns. And it's for a charity called Sam's Charity. So you're very right. 48 hours, not less than that now, about 36 hours to buy the album, support it. And thank you very much, Tom, for your time and your support. Much appreciated. I'll hand you over.
Thank you for joining.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tom. And again, it's great to know that our music's still relevant and that people still enjoy it. For us, that's the greatest reward of it all, really.
Definitely. Well, I'd just like to say a few shout outs to everyone watching tonight, and all of the Weapon UK fans, or the new Weapon UK fans, if you've never heard of Weapon UK.
You have now.
So, exactly.
Yeah.
So I just want to give a shout out to one of our post topics. So we have our new bands merch post topic on the page, which we advertise all the bands merch for them. So if you're not on there, get on there and have a look at all the merch and support all the bands all around the world. So that's me coming off air now. So for all your news, reviews and live interviews, please join us at the Metal Lab, the home of underground metal.